I'm State Representative Scott Inman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Inman Insider. 11 weeks of the legislative session have now come and gone, and there's only a handful of weeks left before we close and head off into the summer to go back into our districts to address the needs that you have personally on a door-to-door basis when we go back to campaign or go back to visit with each and every one of you back in Del City and South Oklahoma City. With only a few weeks remaining, the legislative session has really picked up. We've been on the House floor all of this week, both morning and afternoon, and next week is our final deadline week, and we'll be on the House floor from 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and sometimes maybe even until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. It's just that time of year when things pick up, legislation comes flying off the floor and onto the governor's desk. I wanted to visit with you briefly about a few of the bills that have passed off the House floor this week. But before I did that, I wanted to give you a little bit of good information. You may have read this week in the newspaper that our budget outlook or the budget projections for this month were actually better than what we had originally expected. Now granted, they weren't outstanding by any means, but they were just a few percentage points better than what we took in last year, which means that our economy is showing signs of growth and improvement. It's not going to change a whole lot when it comes to this year's budget because we were already set as to how much money we can spend. But it should help in that if the economy continues to improve and the budget continues to grow and revenues continue to come in, then during the summer we'll be able to use some excess revenues that we weren't anticipating to come back in and fill some holes if it holds true. So I'm encouraged with what I saw in the numbers that came out this week from the State Treasurer, Scott Meacham's office. With that being said, here are a couple of the bills that I wanted to address with you. The first two have to deal with public education. As you all know, the budget's tight, and so we've tried to find a way through Senate Bill 1858 to alleviate some of the burdens on our public school system. What Senate Bill 1858 does is it allows for school districts, school boards, and superintendents to essentially ignore the mandate, the textbook mandate that currently exists. You may or may not know that there are mandates that so often, every few years, school districts have to buy a new math book or a new science book or different things along those lines, and there's money specifically set aside that can only be used for those textbooks. Well, in this tough economic time, we've decided that the legislature, after discussing it with school officials, that it's probably best that instead of buying brand new textbooks, we use that hundreds of thousands of dollars per district, and oftentimes in many cases, we use that to backfill holes or to avoid furloughs or teacher layoffs. So Senate Bill 1858 alleviates that mandate for 2 years, and then after that 2 years it comes back online and they've got to use that money again to buy those new textbooks. But that passed off the House floor this week. Another measure that deals with public education is Senate Bill 1633. It's called basically called the School District Transparency Act. I can't tell you how many times members of my constituency from Del City or South Oklahoma City or other folks have asked me, well, where does the money that we put into education go? Where is it really spent? How much is spent? Where does the money come from? What the School District Transparency Act does in 1633, Senate Bill 1633, would require the State Department of Education to put clear consent on a website and break it down by district as to how your tax dollars are being spent and where they're being spent within the school district. That passed out with overwhelming support in the House of Representatives this week, and I look forward to seeing that signed by the governor in the near future. Another piece of legislation going off in a different direction is Senate Bill 2142. It allows for military personnel and active duty military personnel to be able to vote through electronic format even if they're not deployed overseas. I guess the way the current election system works now is if our military personnel are overseas, there's a certain procedure they can use to vote back here in Oklahoma. Unfortunately, though, recently, if they've just been deployed to, say, Maine or some other place, they haven't been able to use those same tactics. Senate Bill 2142 would allow them to use that so that their voice is heard, so they're able to vote come November much more easily. The last thing I want to talk to you about is one that is a piece of legislation that I actually opposed, and that is Senate Bill 1688. It deals with allowing nuclear power plants to be built in Oklahoma. I'm not so much concerned necessarily about the effect that nuclear power might have on the state. Some people are. They always think about Chernobyl and all those catastrophic events. My concern is that under Senate Bill 1688, if a nuclear power plant, which would cost billions of dollars to build, were allowed to be built in the state of Oklahoma, whatever power company that built it would be able to put every dime that they spent on that nuclear power plant back onto your rates. In other words, your rates would go through the roof. And if they started to build it and then backed out at the end and said, no, we're not going to go through with it, every dime that they spent could still be put onto your bill, so you wouldn't even be able to see the benefits of possible nuclear power being produced down the road. And so I opposed it. Unfortunately, it passed out with a fair amount of support. We'll see if it meets the governor's standard and is signed later on this week. But those are a few of the bills that I wanted to visit with you about. I hope that's been informative for you. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to contact my office. You can always call me at 557-7370 or email me. But again, thank you for this opportunity to serve you. I hope you had a wonderful week, and look forward to visiting with you in the near future, and God bless.